Let us build a bridge of music, and let us cross it with a song. Let us span another canyon, let us right another wrong. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way.
We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Thank you, Bill Staines, for letting us use your song.
It just occurred to me when you said off and on our way, I'm thinking, hi ho, it's off to work we go.
You know, well, by the way,
Sleeping Beauty, right?
That's another.
The dwarves. They were going to the mines.
Yeah, well, that's another form of work. You know, it's off to work we go. We were discussing that with someone yesterday about how we're going to define what is work and what is actually fun. And I think work should be fun. And a lot of people say, well, if work was fun, it wouldn't be work. Well, that's a way subjectively of looking at it. Welcome to Bridges Programming, and this is Sunday on the Front Stoop. We have with us Susan Coleman to my right, Dennis Carius on the phone with us. Hello, Dennis.
Hello,
hey, Dennis.
And we're going to be talking about something that we actually heard. It's a quote that only fools and profiteers want war, and that's a problem.
And guess who said it?
Well, Xena Warrior Princess said that,
right?
But I think that was said by many other people, and I think the writers stole that one.
But we're crediting
Xena Warrior Princess for that. Only fools
and profiteers want war.
We are here on Google Hangouts. If you know how to get to us, you're more than welcome. We're also on Skype on the Bridges Programming. You can see on the screen our different websites. Right now it's saying Bridges Programming, and then of course it says bridgesprogramming.com. Please go to that website, and then the next website comes up is Human Renewable Energy Measure, and that's coming up now on the program. If you refresh your screen, you'll be able to see us live, Dennis, and then anybody else. So you should.
You and Susan live right now.
Oh,
we're alive.
Okay, well,
hello, Dennis.
It's not showing we have any viewers yet, but I guess that takes time. And then that's bridgesprogramming.com, and the other nonprofit company we custodians of is called Renew the Earth, and that is a nonprofit. And if you want to contribute to that, right off you can. And that sort of helps pay for some of the bills here.
And there's an interesting part of that website. If you have grandchildren, children, the age, let's say 5 to 12 or something like that, there are what are called Earthlings letters under the blog there that are written to the children about nature and walking on nature walks and observing and being what I would call noticers. Noticers. They're noticing things, and there are some little experiments they can do with their parents or an adult, to get them excited about what's going on around them in nature. And so anyway, if you go to the site renewtheearth.org and you go under the blog and click on the Earthlings letters, I think there's 6 of them now, and the 7th one is in progress. So I hope you enjoy them with your children or grandchildren, and so that's the deal.
And also there's a free download about climate change that Dennis likes to talk about. We all are sort of looking at that, and that's called O'Leary's World, and that's a 25 or 30 page book that Susan wrote.
Like you can see
it's a cartoon.
there,
it's a cartoon,
and it's a free download, so yeah, that's also on the website there, and it's about Illyria having adventures with her friend who's a robot.
Yeah,
and they're learning about climate change, not only in their fantasy world, but also in the classroom when she returns to her, she's daydreaming, and then she returns to the classroom mentally. The teacher is teaching them about what's happening with the climate and how other creatures are being affected.
Right, and the other thing is there's a interesting thing in that we don't ask you to put your social security or your website or your name, and you don't have to do anything. These are free. We want to make sure that people get this message out. And if you understand what we're doing, this is a humanitarian station, and we try to give everybody a voice and say, what do you think is going to help humanity? You're listening to Sunday on the Front Stoop, the longest stoop in the world now. We ask you to please join us on the Front Stoop. Unfortunately, we're not doing it from a Front Stoop now. We're doing it from our studio in Westerlo, New York. And we also have done these programs from our boat, which is interesting because we use all solar panels. So if you look at last Friday's show, we show you we keep on flashing on the sundown on the back of the boat, the stern of the boat. And we did a program last Friday about Utah Phillips, who's been dead for quite a number of years, but his comments and songs are excellent. And we played some of his music and we commented on the songs. And we think that most people are complaining about the problems, like the Occupy movement, like the transition movement, like the resource-based economy, Venus Project, all these things. But no one really has an answer. And a group of us, by some form of enlightenment, found a measurement that we think is very important to put into the language. And all we ask you to do is to try to understand about the HREM, the Human Renewable Energy Measure. And if you can possibly understand it, get it out to as many possible accesses as you can, or social media groups, or talk about it in your church. And I would really like to have the pastors and the priests of this world listen to their Pope and start preaching about the HREM or the Pope's encyclical about how the economy is killing people around the world. And I know that we don't want to kill anybody, but we are. And it's very hard to face up to that. So I know, Dennis, you feel as though you're not killing anybody, but we really are killing people. And I am, and we all are in this part of the world because of our economic system. So we need to get a human renewable energy measure. So we say that no human being should be damaged or hurt or suffer. I was at one of the malls yesterday in New York State, and there were two people, a male on one side of the mall and a female on the other side of the mall, begging for food, and they were homeless and hungry. And the word was, can you help in any way you can? God bless. And, you know, it was a shame. And we were walking on foot for basically exercise, and we figured we'd take a walk over to our favorite little restaurant and get a little salad. And then we saw these people, you know, begging out there. So we picked up a senior food and senior drink and gave it out to one of them, or shared it, whatever we could find. The female wasn't there by that point in time. But anyway, it's a bad thing to see people begging. Dennis, do you think it's a good idea to have people begging for food? What do you think?
I don't think that's a good idea, no.
So how do we stop that?
And
yes. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, I just wanted to comment on what Jeff was saying, because it was only because we were walking, that we were on foot, that we actually could walk back to where one of the individuals was with their placard, you know, saying homeless and anything will help. Only that way could we actually physically walk up to them and hand them, you know, the hamburger and the drink. And immediately that individual, you know, went to the side to, you know, he was very, very hungry.
Right.
So, you know, if you're driving, this isn't possible. It was because we were walking. And as Jeff said, we walked on a footpath because you know,
No sidewalks.
a dirt footpath that had been well worn between where the sidewalk ended and about, you know, what, a quarter of a mile later
Right.
it began again. So, you know, and we had to walk through the lawns of, you know, a huge corporation that's established for the Farm Bureau, you know, to get to the next sidewalk. They didn't put a sidewalk.
It wasn't set up for people to walk.
It wasn't
Right.
at all set up for people to walk, for people to get the impression of what's happening on the ground, so to speak. I mean, like symbolically on the ground. If you pass people who are starving in your car, you just get a fleeting impression. You think, well, I can't stop. I've got other things to do. You know, I can't think about this. Some people do stop and hand the person some money or something like that. And we saw that happen as we walked by. But still, they're holding up other people behind them and they feel, oh, I can't stop the traffic. I have to keep going. So there's a certain pressure to remain in the flow of the traffic and in the flow of being in a car. When you're walking, you have more choices and you observe a lot more. And, you know, you get real time and real on the ground impressions. And, you know, I recommend walking, even though it's not encouraged, you know, because we all like to get to where we're going so fast, you know, is the governing, you know, we're in a hurry, but we're not accomplishing more by being in a hurry, but we are encouraged to be in a hurry, probably because you observe less and you interact less. And, you know, that's useful for the economic system also. But that's something that's evolved over many hundreds of years in this country since the car, you know, was invented. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Well, no, I think the car's a good idea.
I think it is too.
My point, though.
I'm not saying get rid of your cars.
No, but
you know, add something else to your lifestyle.
The problem, and this is what this show is about, and we'll get down to the show now. But the show's about I mean, the headline of this show is about why are we having wars? Why are we killing people? Now, Dennis, you feel as though you're not killing anybody, right?
Right. Especially when I got my car that drives on, you know, it's a Prius, right?
But how are you making the batteries for that Prius?
How am I making the?
Well, how are the batteries being made for that Prius? Aren't they using a certain amount of natural resources?
Okay, so if they're using natural resources, is that killing anybody?
In certain cases, yes. In other words, we need lead. We need what do they call that? That blue stuff. Cobalt.
For the phones.
And therefore we go to Africa for that particular thing. Yeah, we are killing people, and we have to face up to the fact that we are, as a Western culture, who using this economic system, we are in fact killing people, and we have to face up to that. It's not just the oil, it's all the natural resources we use. And I'm not saying we shouldn't use natural resources, but all humanity must be they have to have, for their amount of their life on this planet, their basic needs met. And once we start doing that, it's not a minimum wage, it's a living wage for about an hour of their time. A living wage.
Of work.
A day of work.
Right.
1 hour a day of a living wage. If we do that, and that's how we judge our gross domestic product and our gross natural product, and we put that into our vocabulary, we'll stop killing people. And until we get to that simple number, we will continue to do what we do, and we'll continue to have wars by the fools and profiteers. And if we don't wake up to that, we are fools. We are either fools or we are not wanting to face facts that we in fact are killing someone. And it really is a shame.
Well, the nations that are benefiting the most from this kind of economics are a minority of the world population. This is
Small group.
and we're part of that minority if we're able to do this kind of programming and have the advantage of a certain amount of retirement funds to
We're
allow
very
us to have free
privileged.
time.
We are very privileged. First of all, being a white male in the United States is a huge privilege. I'm going to sneeze.
Advantage, you mean? Gesundheit.
Pardon me, we have a lot of ragweed in this area this time of year. I seem to be sneezing a lot. Anyway, I'm going to sneeze again.
Okay, well, you want me to go on with
I'm just curious to hear Dennis.
how many times you're going to sneeze?
I don't know, but I'm sorry, I'm sniffling.
Is Jeff curious or curious?
I'm curious to see.
What Dennis Carius would like to say.
Sorry.
Oh, good. Can I say something about back to critical path?
Certainly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, good. I'm just reading it on the screen right now. It says back to, quote, critical path, end quote. Buckminster Fuller's explanation of economic evolution through the First World War, 1929 Great Crash, then the Second World War, continues to be our focus. We will be commenting on his insights and hope you will join in. Thanks for writing that. That looks nice.
That was that's our program summary. In fact, I wanted to bring up, Critical Path is the name of Buckminster Fuller's book. Here it is. And you can get it on the internet. It's out of print. We don't like that idea, but it is out of print, but you can still get it through Amazon, probably used copies. But anyway, we learned recently that there's what's called a critical path method, and it's a
military term.
Yes, it's diagrams and things like that, which lots of military people like to use, which is all good, and I guess it works for them. But here's what critical path method, and they abbreviate it as CPM. I'm going to read, and this is Wikipedia that defined it here.
Well,
it's just a way to start with the concept. And I believe that Buckminster Fuller, having been involved with the Navy himself, I'm sure that he took that term, probably took that term from critical path method, which is a project modeling technique developed in the late 1950s by Morgan R. Walker of DuPont and James E. Kelly Jr. of Remington Rand. And then it goes on just to give you a little history of how they got to developing it. But then, and it was developed about the same time by Booz Allen Hamilton and the U.S. Navy. The precursors of what came to be known as critical path were developed and put into practice by DuPont between 1940 and 43 and contributed to the success of the Manhattan Project. And of course, we know what that was, the developing of the atomic bomb.
But that, I don't know, I don't like to use the word of course, because of course we don't know that. A lot of people don't even know what the Manhattan Project was.
Well, that's why I'm saying that's what it was called. That project was called the project that developed the atomic bomb, which is a hydrogen bomb at that time. I think they do it with other things now. Was called the Manhattan Project, and it used what is called critical path method. Critical path method is commonly used with all forms of projects, this goes on to say, including construction, aerospace and defense, software development, research projects, product development, engineering, and plant maintenance, among others. Any project with interdependent activities can apply this method of mathematical analysis. Although the original CPM program and approach is no longer used. The term is generally applied to any approach used to analyze a project network logic diagram. So, you know, okay, we got the diagram. It's a way to approach all these different inputs into a goal-oriented project and try to decide what to do first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Basic technique. The essential technique for using critical path method is to construct a model of the project that includes the following. 1, a list of all activities required to complete the project, typically categorized within a work breakdown structure. Now that sounds like a military term. Interesting. And you can click on that and go and get that definition.
By the way, we are doing that with Bridges programming. We have a goal.
Yeah, and
we have a set
of activities that are required to get to that.
And we didn't know we were doing this until we read Buckminster Fuller and then critical path, and now we looked at this, and the critical path is exactly what we're trying to do.
Now, number 2 is the time duration that each activity will take to complete. And, you know, we're getting a sense of that because we couldn't have determined it before we started getting into this project,
right? How
long everything was going to take, which is interesting. I guess they're assuming here that a lot of the things, the activities may have already been done in conjunction with other projects that whatever. So there are time designations to these things, but we had no idea when we got our project started how much time it would take to do each activity. But that seems to be the second thing that that is considered with the critical path method. Then 3, the dependencies between the activities. So what if this has to be done? Does another activity have to be done before this can be done? So there you have a hierarchy in which activities come first, second, and third.
What do they call that? A triage.
Right.
Method of what has to be done first.
And then 4, and this is the last thing supposedly, logical endpoints such as milestones or deliverable items. All these nice military terms, deliverable items. Which now are, you know, accepted language, you know, for a lot of companies. Logical endpoints.
Go ahead.
So logical endpoints, such as, so you're trying to set goals within the scope of your final goals. So you got your first goals, your second goals, your third goals, just to keep you on track before you get to your final goal. So, yeah, unfortunately, that's the phone that we can't deal with right now, but it's not your phone ringing, but it's ours. I always get confused myself. So what we did, you know, with this project, we're trying to get the human renewable energy measure concept into the public domain so that people can consider it. We first said, well, what's the most logical, efficient thing we can do?
Well, first we had to get to our goal, and our goal was we knew there was something wrong with the economic system, and then we came up with this concept of the human renewable energy measure, and we said, my God, if that is right, and we always have questions to see if it's right or wrong, because no one's ever sure because there's a certain synergy here, but we think that if we had a measurement just like gravity, and using the renewable energy measurement in concept, the goal was to start to get that measurement in place, in the vocabulary.
Well,
not to institute it, just to get it to help humanity.
A discussion started.
Right. Yeah. Now that's the goal. Then what's the next step to get that in place if it's a good idea? Well, we said we need a humanitarian station because mainstream media is not going to pick this up.
No, because it's too conceptual. It's too fraught with difficulties for them because
it changes the way the economic system works.
They are going to promote the economics.
So that next phase was, okay, to do that, we're going to have to start our own radio television network. To do that, we need people who know how to do that, which we don't. So lucky enough, we found a few people, and one of them specifically who runs his own networking programming, Levi, and he runs network solutions. And is that what that conceptual solutions? Techceptional solutions. And he's been great in showing us how to get all this together. And of course, and now we need to get more people who do humanitarian programming. Now, each one of these is part of what
intermediate goals.
Intermediate goals,
right,
to get to the main purpose of this. So that's what we're here for.
The final goal.
So we're asking you, please do programming if you have a better or think a better way or a way that helps humanity. That's
So
our goal.
I'm just going to read a little teeny bit more about the definition of critical path method. I'm not going to read the whole thing because anybody can go to Wikipedia and find this. Using these values, those 4 steps that we just went through, critical path method calculates the longest path of planned activities to logical endpoints or to the end of the project, and the earliest and latest that each activity can start and finish without making the project longer. So this process determines which activities are, quote, critical, and in fact, they're on the longest path, and which have total float, which means they can be delayed without making the project longer. In project management, a critical path is the sequence of project network activities which add up to the longest overall duration, regardless if that longest duration has float or not. So we've done that too. We're in, kind of conjecture, well, how long do you think this is going to take? How long can we keep doing this? How long can we keep up our enthusiasm, blah, blah, blah. So we're thinking, well, a couple of years, maybe, and then we'll see. We'll reevaluate in a couple of years, see where we are at that point.
But while we're doing it, we're planting seeds all over. We're planting seeds. We're still getting 3,000 or 4,000 hits a week on our programming. How long people watch or how they understand is we can't control that. But I can tell you something, and Dennis can go into that. Dennis, you've heard of something called Move On. You've heard of that, right?
Yes.
Now, Move On is another way that they believe they can help fix the humanitarian world, but they, again, are just trying to do it through the same old political system. And then you've heard of something called, let's see, Energize or Solarize Albany and Solarize Troy and Solarize the Planet or whatever. You've heard of that, right?
Oh, yes, all over the planet, yes.
But the point is, they believe that's another way of trying to help humanity. And they're all little things that are very good things. And how about Occupy Group? You've heard of that.
That's
right?
Interesting, Occupy. Yes, when you mentioned Move On, Occupy came after that, and Move On said 98%, and then Occupy says 99%.
Well, but it's totally irrelevant on the percentages because it's just subjective or opinions. I'm saying to you, what they all have in common, 100%, and that includes, by the way, the conservative groups as well. They all want to benefit humanity in some form. They have different ways of going about it. Some people say we have to kill out some of the population and they're expendable. But they all believe that they're doing something beneficial to help their the grandchildren. Some people even believe we have to kill other people so they don't kill us. That to me is a little insane, but that's how they believe, and I have to understand that. If I don't understand that, then I'm being not understandable. I'm being unreasonable. I have to be able to understand what they're thinking for me to continue to be able to deal with people, other human beings. So, but all these groups like Move On and Occupy and Solarize, they're all trying to work within the economic system. And my suggestion to all of them is you have to know where you are. We have to have a point of reference that we all agree upon, that all humanity has to have their basic needs met. And once we do that, then we can get to the point that they want to go to. I mean, Occupy says it's unfair. You guys, you wealthy people, are taking advantage of my life's time of education, and you're taking my jobs away and giving them to the cheapest possible place. And I'm now suffering, and I can't pay my bills. The Solarized group is saying, wow, if we have renewable energy, maybe we would stop the wars because we have nature giving us our energy. And that makes some sense as well. And then you have the Move On group saying, if you vote for the people we suggest that you vote for, we can change the world. And we know that. We've voted people in many, many years over and over again, and we keep on going back and forth, and the world doesn't get changed. It's the same old. I mean, I had a lot of confidence in with the change that Obama was going to bring to us, and the first thing he did right after he got his Nobel Peace Prize was send drones in to kill other people.
Before that, no, after he was inaugurated.
Well, no, first he got
just
the Peace
before
Prize.
He was inaugurated, he made that.
But he got a Peace Prize, and then he sent the drones in.
Well, he did do that too after that, but he did it even previous to receiving the Peace Prize.
No, he didn't get the Peace Prize till he got the Peace Prize first. I don't want to digress this.
No,
if anybody has that information, I'm pretty sure he got the Peace Prize.
A horrible message.
And then he sent the drones in. I think that's the way it worked.
Well, whatever.
I was shocked, and I remember that pretty clearly. But if you can look that up online, somebody, and tell us where we're right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It matters that we were hoping for change, and it never happened. I know Bernie Sanders now is running for president against Hillary Clinton on the Democratic line, and he is saying all the right things. Now, whether he ever gets into office or not, with
saying the right things and then getting into office and not doing them.
That's right. You can't.
They
can't. Even Bernie saying, even if Jesus Christ himself got into office, or the Pope or any of these people, they can't.
Not as one person,
You've got to understand that all humanity must have their basic needs met.
Well, and people have to assert this. They can't just expect the leader to take them there. But I want to go to Buckminster Fuller because we're halfway through our hour, and I just found where he, in his book Critical Path, talks about critical path, and what he's saying here. Quote, if political society does not decide to do the right tasks for the right reasons, it will probably find our critical path artifacts to be both cogently and specifically essential. He's saying we have to create our own critical path.
Right.
And so what he goes on to say here, the critical path of the Apollo project, and that was, our race to the moon, against supposedly the USSR, one half of whose 2 million or so tasks to be accomplished involved the development of technology that was non-existent at the outset of Apollo. Our critical paths inventory of essential technologies consisted of 100% already developed technologies. Most of these were in use, but in the production of the wrong systems, in the weaponry systems, or in the money-making for the fuse systems, instead of, quote, high wealth living production for all systems.
Right.
So, he's talking now, at this point, I think it's, a little more than halfway through his book, he starts to set out the critical path that he sees possible, for humanity to consider, and so the book is, in a sense, a critical path analysis. It is coming to a point. We haven't read that far yet, but I'm just saying that the definition that we just read is applicable to what Buckminster Fuller is saying in his book, Critical Path. Most of the tasks, he says, quote, that need to be attended to in such a manner as to make all humanity sustainingly successful involve only the right application of the already developed technologies which have been funded and applied to the wrong tasks.
That's what's happening now.
Right. It must be remembered that the overwhelming reason for their being applied to the wrong tasks is the assumption of those commanding the political and economic power structures that there is a fundamental inadequacy of life support on our planet. That it has to be you or me, nowhere nearly enough
This is
for both.
very important.
And
It's a very important statement. That, would you repeat that last statement? Because that's very important that Buckminster Fuller said, and it's really important to hear this.
Okay, it must be remembered that the overwhelming reason for their being applied, and this is the technologies, to the wrong tasks, all these greatly developed technologies, and the wrong tasks, war, profiteering by war, quote, is the assumption that those commanding the political and economic power structures.
No, he's got that backwards. That's who are commanding the economical and political structure. Okay. See, he's still into the assumption.
He had some hopes for, political functionaries change, right, being able to be autonomous and make some difference. Just like we, as a voting public, thought that President Obama was going to be a functionary within the government that could change it, but he can't. It can't be done now. It may have been possible then because he was still writing, the 80s. I don't know. I think the chances were over even then. But anyway, okay, let me start again because we keep interrupting. It must be remembered, quote, that the overwhelming reason for their being applied to the wrong tasks is the assumption that those commanding the political and economic power structures, that there is a fundamental inadequacy of life support on our planet, that it has to be, you or me, nowhere nearly enough for both, unquote.
Yeah.
And this is, this is also where you get constantly that annoying, to me, repetition of survival of the fittest and all this. This is not nature's way. Nature is constantly trying to create diversity, constantly creating diversity, and that is the leading edge. The leading edge. When you say survival of the fittest, you're saying there's not enough. And that's not what nature is saying. Nature is abundance and diversity, and basing our economics on not enough, you against me, meaning your nation against our nation, your race against our race. These are all life-destroying concepts. They are not life-sustaining concepts.
We need to work in cooperation, not in competition, around the world. We cannot keep on killing people and taking their natural resources. And that's the part that we have to face up to. Dennis, are you actually watching us now on one of your programs? On the program?
Am I what?
Are you actually seeing us live? I'm curious.
Yes,
because I don't see, it's not showing a viewer, and normally it shows us how many viewers we have. So I may be doing something wrong on my end, but it's showing 0 viewers, and normally there's at least 2 or 3 on there. Interesting.
Well, I am watching live right
but
now.
Anyway, I'm going to go back and sort of reiterate what Buckminster Fuller said about World War I. He sort of sums it up in a section here. Quote, at any rate, we now understand why 1914 through 18 war, why it was called World War I. It was inherently a war for mastery over the world's metallic resources and their world-around physical integration, controlling, and exploitation. The amount of metal productivity of World War I was so great that after the war, as the arms products became obsolete and were displaced by new design products, the metal contained in the ever vaster amounts of obsolete products began to come back into circulation as scrap. The scrap resources swiftly increased. The Morgan, that means J.P. Morgan, who financed
The people
most
with the
of World
money.
War
The people
I.
with the money.
The Morgan escaped managerial capitalist said, quote, "I'm going to keep my job if we pay our stockholders dividends. The rate at which we can pay dividends is directly dependent upon the rate at which our production wheels go around. To keep our wheels going around, we don't care whether we're using scrap metals or mined metals. As a matter of fact, the metals as scrap are usually more refined than the metals coming out of the mines. They cost less, so we are better off using scrap, whether from obsolete buildings, machinery, armaments, railways, or ships." Formerly, Morgan had insisted on all his controlled manufacturing corporations acquiring all their metal stock only from newly mined, refined, and wholesale shaped stocks. The mining companies found that industry could not buy ingots of their metals. They found that they had to turn their metals into tubes, bars, sheet, plate, wire, and great variety of sizes and shapes. Wall Street's finance capitalism therefore underwrote the development of a host of metals shaping industries, who were the automatic customers of the only ingot producing metals mining corporations. They began to be they became in control of the metal markets, is what he's saying, and there was so much more of this metal available, and scrap was just as good as mining.
It was better
less
than mining because
expensive.
the same was
Less
pure.
expensive.
Right.
They could give more and more dividends to their stockholders. So this was as this scrap kept coming back, people like J.P. Morgan were making even more money. From World War I.
And with the money they're controlling.
Not only were they being paid
let me
back.
finish it. With
right.
the money they're controlling,
right.
our economic system, which controls your life. And that's the part that we don't realize, that the economic system is controlling our life.
This is what Xena means by profiteering.
Let me finish this.
Right.
It's very important to understand that when you control they're using economics to control your life, and your lifespan is very finite. And if you're working 16, 20 hours a day, you're a slave in the system. And the very wealthy, and Dennis, you call them the 1% or 0.1%, doesn't really matter, but the very wealthy are controlling the very poor. And no human being is any poorer or wealthier than anyone in the eyes of humanity. We're all pretty much the same. But in the economic system, it's different. We have class distinction in the economic system, be it in India with dots on your head, or the United States with how much money's in the bank. When someone applauds someone, let's say like what's his idiot's name, Donald Trump, because he's got a lot of money, he didn't make that money on his own. His father started something, his father's father started something, and he's capitalizing on the money someone else worked for. And he thinks he's a really smart guy. I don't think he is. I've met Donald Trump. He is a profiteering person who would more than happily go to war and kill as many people as possible, thinking he's superior. He is not. He has no human being has the right to go to war, whether you're a king or you're a president or you're a wealthy person. You have no right to kill another human being to profit. So that's what this is about. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's what we want is, to.
Well, Dennis, did you understand what I just said? The reason why I'm asking you that is I'm not sure I say it right. Did you hear that, Dennis?
I'm sorry, Jeff. Can you say that again?
Did you hear what I just said about the war?
Well, I heard, right, except for the last 30 seconds when my wife was asking me a question.
Okay, I'm saying to you that no human being has the right to put another man in war because they think they're superior.
Or they want to make money.
Or because to make money with. I mean,
exactly. Right.
And in India, they have the class system, which is on your head. And we have the same thing here, but it's called money. And someone who has a lot of money, and they say, I got more money than anybody, everybody, that's why I can be president. And then they clap for that. That's a pretty crazy thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why someone with a lot of money has a lot of money in most cases is because they've inherited that money from other people's work, their father's work, or their grandfather's work, or their great-great-grandfather's work, and they think they're superior, but they're not. They've been brought up with privilege of money. But if you took the money away and got rid of the basic essence of the money, which has no value for humanity, but much farther ahead, then you see where I'm going with that?
Yes, right. And did we do the right thing in sending our troops over to Vietnam?
Certainly, because we had to kill those gooks, right, man? We had to kill those people, right?
Wow.
Didn't we have to kill them? Isn't that what they told? If you listen to our Utah Phillips show, you'll hear about why we went over to Vietnam, why we have people coming back here. And let me ask you a question, Dennis. If I told you that there's some evil people across the street from you, go into their house and set out a bomb, and when they come out of the house, shoot them if they're on fire, would you do that, or would you think that would be a crazy thing to do?
I would use the word crazy, yes.
Okay, now when you go to war, and we do that, and we send people to go kill those people by the word of something coming out of a TV set or a radio, that those people are evil, go kill them. And then we go overseas and we drop a bomb on them, and then they come out of the house full of, flames on them, and then we shoot them in the head because we got to kill them when they're running out of the building. We give people medals for that, and we say, what a great job you did. Now, don't you think that's pretty crazy?
I do think it's crazy. It's a good question on Sunday on the Front Stoop, because a lot of people on Sunday all preach that thou shalt not kill, and yet we send these drones overseas. Those drones come down. They don't just kill men, they kill women and even children too.
Right.
Actually, most of the casualties of those random bombings are women and children.
Right. Not the soldiers.
Not the soldiers.
And not the people they want to kill. Anyway, we'll go ahead.
Think they want to kill. But let me go forward a little bit with what our summary was hoping to cover today. And when you mentioned the Vietnam War, the slogan was, remember the domino theory?
No.
You remember how this country goes, then this country goes, and this country, and they're all going to become communism, socialism. We don't want that. We got to save the world from communism. And if Vietnam or if we don't stop it there, it's like the dominoes are going to go down. I mean, this was the kind of
thinking process.
It wasn't like World War I saved the world for democracy. This time it was, they always have a little slogan that they're going to catch, the imagination of the public with, and especially they want to catch the imagination of the very young men who are just coming out of high school, 18, 19, 20. These are very vulnerable minds that, that kind of a thing can actually hook them. The domino theory at that time was the Vietnam War slogan. The dominoes are gonna go down one after another, and all those countries will become communists, right? This is a bad thing, not a good thing, as Clinton would say. It's a bad thing. Right. Okay, I'm going to return to Buckminster Fuller. And he says here, we now return to the 1926, 27, 28, 29 sequence of events developing from selling the farmers' machinery on the bankers' drop-dead terms. And we were covering this last Wednesday. Quote, in 1927 and 28, the bigger Western city banks began to foreclose on their local country banks that had financed the farm machinery and had been borrowing from the bigger city banks to cover their unprecedentedly expanding loaning. First the little and then the successively bigger banks found that they had foreclosed on farmhouses, that it had no indoor toilets, many with roofs falling in, barns in poor condition, with they couldn't sell and get their money back.
Right.
Does this sound a little familiar, like our recent 7 years ago real estate bubble that was a way that the banks were trying to recoup their losses by selling and bundling and selling useless loans and mortgages. Okay, and he goes on to say, quote, word of the bad news gradually went around. Small bank runs began, and in 1929 came the great crash in the stock market. All businesses went from worse to worser. Unemployment multiplied.
That's the first time I ever saw that in print, by the way.
Worser.
Worser.
I love that word. Yeah. Unemployment multiplied. Prices steadily dropped. Nobody had money with which to buy. Bigger and bigger banks had to foreclose on smaller banks until finally, in early 1933, there came one day in which 5,000 banks closed their doors to stop, quote, the run on their funds. And that is their final way that they can protect themselves. They can actually close the bank. Nobody can get their money out anymore. And it's interesting because I remember my father talking about that period. He was living as a young person in New York City, and he was talking about how he saw people on the street just trying to sell an apple to get some money so that they could, buy something they needed. It was horrendous.
It's also a very emotional thing. When it's not actually real. That apple will trade, if you have enough apples, you can trade with somebody for something. But it's emotional that you got to have money. And that's where our belief system comes, like belief in God or believe in anything. If you believe, as a matter of fact, there's a statement that Paul Marco puts out in his book, Belief Magic, where he said, the guy said, I'm really sick, and he's been checked by everybody. And he really wasn't sick, but he did die. And then when he died at whatever old age it was, he said, I told you I was sick. And he believed he was sick and dying. So he eventually did die, but his belief was he's going to die. So therefore he did. But he was going to die anyway. But his belief system was such that.
I'm confused.
Now I can, you didn't believe me. Belief is very, very important. But when someone is begging for food, and they really, in this system, they need food, but when the system collapses, psychologically, you feel as though you can't eat, but the factories are still there to manufacture stuff, and there's people out there who want to work in them, so they work a few less hours, they keep the factories open, they still trade amongst themselves. The economic system, the money is totally irrelevant. You can trade for apples or feathers or whatever you decide to trade for. You don't need the okay of Big Brother's money. And that's where we're on now. We believe in this stupid system. And that this stupid system is killing people around the world. And that's what the Pope is saying. By the way, this is Sunday on the Front Stoop. The Pope put out an encyclical several months ago. Why aren't you pastors talking about that?
I hope they are.
Why aren't you pastors listening to your Pope? Yeah. Why aren't you pastors doing sermons on it? Do some work with the Pope's work. He is the guy who you're supposed to be. He's the CEO. He's the CEO of your company. Listen to him. Just annoying.
But anyway, here's
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I just mention one thing, Susan?
Sure.
Go ahead.
We're just 2 days away from a month called not August, but September. That's when the Pope is coming to New York State in a nation called America.
Okay.
Wow, New York State.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
I'm going to ask him to join our programming because we need him here, and if he can understand the HRM, which he's talking about, without the measure, if he can get that measure out there, he'd be very helpful to get this concept out around the world. That would give everybody a place.
Food, shelter, education for 1 hour a day of their labor.
Okay,
and of course,
go ahead.
Well, let me just go on to say what Buckminster Fuller's impression, and he lived through the crash too as a young person. quote, people were dismayed and both individually and collectively helpless to do anything to combat the economic collapse. The economy had gone to pieces. People did not parade and protest. They became so low in spirit and listless that they just sat around silently in their homes or in public places. The New York subway stations were filled with people sleeping on the concrete platforms and stairways. No religious organizations were willing to let people sleep in their churches.
Right.
Okay, so now here's how our government reacted. And this is when, quote, the big New York banks found themselves about to close because they were already behind the scenes insolvent. This occasioned the US Congress voting to accelerate by 4 months the presidential inauguration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, minutes after taking the oath of office, signed the bank moratorium. Does that sound familiar? Which momentarily suspended the acknowledgement of the death of the wealthy landowners' banking system that had lost all their or much of their depositors' money. About a month later, Congress voted to the President of the United States the ability to control all money. Months later, again, the US Supreme Court upheld that legislation. The United States citizens themselves and their government had become the wealth resource, quote, of last recourse. Of last recourse. The underwriting wealth belongs to all the people and not to the few. That happened also to be the description of, guess what? Socialism.
Right.
Oh boy, it's
matter of fact,
the irony
see how the
there.
isms sort of come together
Right.
when you need them? That's interesting.
Okay, the 150-year, this is, Buckminster Fuller goes on to say, the 150-year-long, quote, infinite wealth poker hand and its uncalled bluffing was over. The called hands were suddenly down. It turned out that the wealthy's wealth was non-existent. So, here we go into another cycle that is saying this to us again. I mean, we've recently had the stock market drop dramatically.
And it
right?
just dropped again this week.
And on the radio, you keep
But
hearing
it doesn't matter,
people
don't you
saying,
see?
don't panic, don't panic, don't
doesn't
pull the rest of
matter.
your money out. Okay.
We have an NPR program here,
Right.
and the person who's the CEO or the president or whatever you call this guy, he's panicking because he's got all his money in the stock market.
Right.
And he's a very wealthy guy, but the guy went from theoretically a liberal to what I consider a really wolf in sheep's clothing now. He's the most conservative guy, and he's on our national public radio, and he talks more like a conservative than anyone on Fox News, which I'm finding amazing. Anyway, here we go.
It's interesting because here now the banks are in such a cognitive dissonance because they don't like socialism. They don't want that to happen, but they have to get all the population of the government of the United States to bail them out. So they want socialism when that's the case.
Unfortunately, we have to leave you guys.
Oh no, we're going. Okay.
Thank you all for listening. Stay tuned again.
Your neighbor's out of work because they closed the factory. You try to stretch your paycheck, but it's never quite enough. So energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. Fossil fuel affects our lives like ripples on a lake. Cars and farms and factories and trucks. Supplies go down and prices soar, our futures are at stake. And when it's gone, it won't come back and we'll be out of luck. Oh, energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone? Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.
We can get our energy from corn and grass and trees. Even trash converts to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies.
Renewables can fuel the world.
We're here to spread the news. Oh, energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone? Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.